Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Liverpool City Region Combined Authority Transport Committee, our second virtual committee as the current situation dictates. Obviously, the meeting is currently being broadcast live on the Combined Authority's website and available for subsequent viewing as it's been recorded. And first and foremost, I would like to wish all of our members and officers present, but anyone watching at home, I hope that them and all of their family and friends are safe and well at this very challenging and difficult time for the whole globe, but particularly for our city region as we've gone through additional restrictions before arriving at today's second national lockdown. In terms of some of the housekeeping rules I just need to remind everyone of is that if members or officers wish to speak at any time in the meeting, please could they indicate via the chat box facility by typing into that speak or comment or something appropriate that I can then sort of pick up and see. And when people aren't speaking, please can they make sure that their microphones are muted and their correct cameras are switched off. However, when it is your opportunity to speak and called, please, if you can give it a moment just to unmute your microphone, switch on your camera so we can see you, and then obviously speak and comment or ask questions accordingly. The second bit of housekeeping that's just sort of pertinent for me to kind of mention is that Councillor John Wiseman has left us from St Helens Borough Council. He wasn't reappointed following St Helens' recent AGM. I really want to kind of place on record my sort of thanks and all of our thanks across the committee and the organisation for all John's sort of dedication and hard work over the past year. You know, he's a very good friend to all of us, and we really appreciate the hard work that he gave us over the past year. I will be in contact with him probably more by an email than a traditional letter at this moment in time. But as some leave us, we obviously kind of have others that join us, and I have to say it's a very, very warm welcome returning indeed to Councillor Sue Murphy from St Helens, who's back with us again, and it's great to have Sue back on board, and really looking forward to working with her over the months and hopefully years ahead as well. So brilliant to have you back, Sue. If I can move on to the first item, which is apologies for absence. And Lisa, have we received any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors John Dodd and also from Alan Jones.
Okay, and I think it's just appropriate to mention that with Councillor Jones, his wife isn't very well and he has to look after her at this moment in time. So if we can send all of our very best wishes to his wife for her speedy recovery. And I'm sure kind of hopefully everything will be well there. I've also just had a message from Councillor Margie O'Mara that she's currently having some issues with her electrics at home that she's hoping she'll be able to resolve and be able to join us in the meeting shortly. But just so we can note if she's unable to get on, that is the reason and one of the kind of challenges of the current virtual situation. I've also had a message from Councillor Anthony Lavelle at the moment. He's struggling to get into the digital meeting, so if someone could try to contact him so we can facilitate him joining the meeting, I'd really appreciate that as well. Are there any other indications of apologies for absence? I don't think there are, but if anyone wants to sort of indicate, no? Okay. Moving on to the second item, that's obviously the standard declarations of interest, and that's just for me to remind all members that if they've got any kind of declarations that they're aware of, please indicate now and we can accordingly record and deal with those appropriately. If at any stage during today's proceedings, through the discussion, the debate, or any of the kind of report presentations, that you become aware of a declaration that you might need to make, then please make sure that you mention it as well so we can do the necessary reporting of that. Moving on to item number 3, it's the minutes of the last meeting. And can I move that the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 24th of September, be approved as a correct record? Is that agreed? Not hearing any dissent or seeing indications otherwise, so I'll accept that as unanimous acceptance. If we could, excellent. If I can then move on to the first report that we've got of the afternoon, and that's the Transforming Cities update. And Shane Fitzpatrick, our Interim Director of Transport, is going to provide a presentation for the committee to accompany the report that you've got in your documents. So Shane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just go through the report, can I just check, Lisa, is the slides that run with this, is that coming after the report, or is the report coming up on the screen?
No, the slides are available now, Shane, if you want to go through the presentation first.
Okay, let me through the presentation first then. If you can put up the first slide then, please.
Okay.
Okay, on to the next one, Lisa.
It's
Okay.
Shauna driving the slideshow for you, Shane.
Oh, is it Shauna?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sleight of hand behind the screen. That's right. Thanks, Shauna. My name's, as Liam said, is Shane. I'm the Interim Director of Integrated Transport. I'm also the lead officer for Transforming Cities Fund, and that was a £172.5 million capital fund awarded to the combined authority for a 5-year period, which is completed by March 2023. The commissioning of the work was through the Transforming Cities projects, and it fell under 3 themes when it was commissioned by the combined authority. The first theme was about improving and expanding public transport network to meet the new needs, new areas of demand. The second theme was on improving the appeal of public transport, and particularly bus, against private car. And finally, the third theme was on intervening for wealth and well-being. On to the next slide, please. So if we look at the delivery to date, next slide, please. We've got completion of the first phase of the smart ticketing programme. So the programme itself is made up of 19 interventions. So one of these interventions is on smart ticketing, and that included investment in ticketing machines to enable all the buses to accept smart tickets and contactless payments, and the development of a ticket website portal. Another intervention that formed part of the programme was the delivery of 120 kilometres of fibre optic cable along the Merseytravel system, enabling the full technology capability of the state-of-the-art, so Wi-Fi and other CCTV, the screens in the saloons, the linkage into public transport information, possible advertising in the future as part of that, will all form part of the benefits. The third scheme that's highlighted on progress in the last 12 months is battery technology. So one of the key aims of the long-term rail strategy, which was originally approved by the combined authority in 2014, prior to being updated in 2017, there was an identification that we're looking to improve connectivity to the travel to work economic area. So the static population of the city region is about 1.6 million. With the travel to work area, it goes to about 2.5 million. And one of the key aims is to look for expansion of the Merseyrail network. Now, the existing network is what's called third rail, which is an electrified rail between the tracks that runs around, that forms a network. But when you move off that network, it's not feasible unless you build infrastructure and electrics, overheads, gantries, as part of that, to be able to extend the Merseyrail network. Battery technology offers that opportunity where you're able to penetrate into the travel to work area without building all that infrastructure. So we've got a trial going on within the Transforming Cities Fund, which is looking to maximise the innovation on battery technology and test it on the new locomotive to see if we may be able to journey up to a set distance outside the existing network. And that trial is underway at the moment. We made a commitment to that, and they were looking for the results and feedback from that trial around June of next year. Next slide, please. Runcorn Station Quarter is another project, and that has had significant progress that has taken place. It's a reconfiguration of the network at Runcorn Station and a piazza type improvements to public realm, and looking to connectivity between Runcorn Station and the Centre Centre. This work is in work is in delivery at the moment, and will be completed towards the back end of next year. and is one of the schemes that's well into its delivery phase in terms of the overall programme. Work has continued on the cycleway for phase 1 of the work for the cycling. The cycling forms part of the 10-year strategy for cycling, which is was approved by the combined authority, which is the LC-WIP, or its work implementation plan for cycling, and that was approved by the combined authority in November last year with a 10-year implementation plan as part of that. Next slide, please. And again, please. So what are we doing for the next 12 months? Well, one of the key elements on one of the interventions was investment in ferries. And what we're currently doing is we're in tender at the moment and looking to bring forward proposals for 2 new ferries, low carbon ferries, and that process we'll be looking to put into place and make those decisions by early next year, which allow approximately 2-year period for the vessels to be undertaken, designed, trialled, etc., so that they come to fully into service operation around March or early 2023. We've also invested in the pontoon and the replacement bridges at Seacombe. That's a significant investment. We've placed that contract and work formally starts on that, so we'll have the closure of Seacombe landing stage and the use of Woodside landing stage for ferry crossings while we undertake the refurbishment to the landing stage at Seacombe and the bridges linked to that landing stage. The second one is on the purchase of hydrogen bus cells. So what we've got is 20 hydrogen buses that we're seeking and to procure. We're just going through the tendering exercise at the moment, and the intention is that we would be committing to manufacture and design of that running for approximately a 2-year period, so that we would have 20 hydrogen buses. The intention of that would be the buses will be initially placed on one of the corridors that we're investing through the green, what we call the green corridors, which is looking at minimising delays for public transport down the 10A or the A57 going from Liverpool, Knowsley St Helens, and we're looking to do improvements so that we get a public transport enhancements both on journey times, passenger experience, and contributes to the air quality agenda as part of the overall ambitions to be carbon neutral by 2040. The next investment is looking at 5 stations. So we've got, it's called Access for All. And what that's looking for is looking at lifts and step-free access improvement at 5 stations. 3 of the stations are on the Merseytravel network. That's St Michael's, Hillside and Birkenhead Park. And 2 of the stations are on the northern network line, the northern line at Broad Green and Hunts Cross. This is a joint, so that half the funding for that is coming from Transforming Cities Fund and half the funding from that is coming directly from DFT Centralised Fund. We're continuing on the delivery of Liverpool City Region cycle network in Halton and Wirral over the next 2 years, and that's 2 of the schemes over the 10-year, as part of the 10-year implementation plan approved by the combined authority in November of this year. We're also looking at upgrading of City Region's traffic light installations, and this is to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of prioritising and thereby reduce carbon emissions, both in terms of public transport and more efficient use for the highway as across that. That comes under the control of our Key Route Network Manager that we put in place in June of this year to help coordinate all 6 authorities within that city region enhancements. Next slide, please. Some of the planned work includes is a new Merseyrail station at Headbolt Lane. So that particular project, it involves the building of a line through from the main network through to Headbolt Lane, about 3/4 of a mile of new line, and then a new station at Headbolt Lane. It's a key project delivery. It's quite a significant investment. And one of the ambitions is, if the battery technology that I discussed a little bit earlier is successful, that we can extend battery technology so we don't have to build a third rail of 3/4 of a mile. We can actually use the battery technology. That's one of our options. However, the scheme has a resilience that if we have to build third rail to be extended, we've heard from the ORR recently that they would be minded to support that principle if the battery technology innovation wasn't there at the time that decision was made. The scheme itself is quite a significant scheme. We've got through to a preferred option, so what's called GRIP Stage 3, which is a singular option, and we're looking to complete the work on that for the business case early into next year. The next intervention down is the starting delivery, and this is the 10A route, which is the A57 out of Liverpool towards Knowsley St Helens, and that is the one that we've got a range of packages and investment which will straddle, which covers traffic signal upgrades. It covers other bus priority element upgrades. It covers geometrical improvements on the highway, so we get through traffic at junctions. It looks at the passenger facilities along that route, and of course we will be looking to utilise the hydrogen bus as part of the fleet operating down that 10A route as part of the overall package of green corridors. The next item within the programme is Lee Green, and that is looking at improvements both to the facilities, new building facility extension of the park and ride element, and the walking and cycling element, so that we do an upgrade to meet the demand and to up the quality of the public transport provision for customers. We've got Central Station up there to support. This is looking at reconfiguration of the highways around the Central Station, and that is to link in better to the 1,000 new homes on the brownfield site in close proximity, and to improve the provision of services and both from environmental side and indeed from the use of public transport. Next slide, please. Another scheme that we're looking to take forward in parallel with Headbolt Lane's new station in Knowsley is the Baltic Quarter, and it's St James Station. And what that is a original station was located here and was closed in 1917, and we're looking to develop a new station in terms of improving accessibility. We're working with Liverpool City Council about access to the station, as it will be there'll be no park and ride elements to St James Station. It will be accessed by active travel means to utilise the station. So it's those enabling works will form the first part of that station project, and we'll see an early part sometime next year, and then the actual delivery of the station itself will run through to about 23-24 for completion of that project. The next item down is Central Station. Central Station is a key project for Liverpool City region. It takes 50% of the passengers through per annum as a station. In fact, it's more utilised than Lime Street, although perhaps not as well known. It was a key constraint to growth. We've invested in new trains, just putting the COVID aspects to one side. Now we've invested in new trains that can take up to 50% more passengers. Central Station was at or near capacity within the next few years. So this is a major investment, and it's looking at linking through a commercial investment over the top of the station and tied into the regeneration led by Liverpool City Council in terms of public realms and the link back to the Knowledge Quarter. So we've got, at the moment, for that particular project, we're working on GRIP Stage 2, which is a feasibility stage, and that will then lead on to an outcome from a preferred option, which will emerge early next spring as part of that work. So the investment from the Transforming Cities forms part of this development work that we're going through at the moment, prior to obviously seeking funding for the full implementation as the timeline does fall outside March 2023. Central Station itself will be a 7-year project, and that will run through at the moment. That runs through with the team. We've got an integrated team working on Central Station, and in effect the commercial aspects of that are on a different timeline than the rail aspects. So the rail aspects will take a number of years past that, but we need to make decisions at this stage so that you don't build a 15-storey building over an area you want to put a station through at a lower level at a later date, which would be difficult to do and a lot more cost effective. So we're working in a consortium, so ourselves, Network Rail, the Combined Authority, Liverpool City Council are working on that alongside the developer themselves. And the final one there is HS2 Station Commission. So that's a station commission that is at the early stages of initial considerations. So the Mayor announced earlier this year of a mayoral commission to look at that multimodal future ambition for a station. And this contribution from Transforming Cities is perhaps some early technical support for that work when that commissioning work gets underway, which was interfered by COVID. I touched upon about COVID and perhaps its impact. From a Transforming Cities point of view, over the last 12 months, we've maintained the support for the development work in all these interventions. And as part of that work, we were looking at the future demand on the rail, in fact, on bus, on public transport. And we've got work going on to do those forecasts. I think to a large extent, the view is, yes, there'll be disruption to passengers and revenue for a period of time. But the view is that at some stage we'll come out of that, and therefore the support and demands for these interventions on building back better as part of a recovery plan, this programme is a key part of that. Next slide. The report obviously has a lot more details, but I hope walking through a few slides provides a good overview of the work that we've done so far. We're roughly just over halfway through this programme with good progress, but still a lot of challenges to come through and complete the overall programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Shane. That's excellent. That really takes us through in a lot of detail, but only really scratches the surface, all the sort of very sort of detailed and hard work that's going on around that. Are there any sort of questions or comments anyone wants to raise? If you can indicate in the chat box if you want to speak at all. I'm not seeing any, so I will kind of just finalise by just reminding everyone that obviously the Transforming Cities Fund is, I would never call it new money because the government has taken so much money off our city region, but I would call it a pot of money that's been returned to us that many other city regions don't have access to. I think we need to remember that the Transforming Cities Fund for most of the parts of the country has been something you've got to bid into, and large parts of the country have not been successful in getting anything. The fact we've got a Metro Mayor and a Combined Authority and a devolution deal means we got automatic access to that, and getting the £172.5 million that we've already got to spend on these things is a really great example of what devolution can achieve. And when we go through everything that Shane has cantered through there's some fantastic stuff that genuinely will make a big difference to the way people travel around our region, but also will pioneer a lot of stuff that potentially can be a leader for the whole of the country when we think about hydrogen buses and sort of batteries on trains, just to name two. In normal times, we probably would only do about a third of these things in the normal course of project management, and the fact that the team is doing so much of this detailed work is a real testament to the expertise that we've got in the organisation and the hard work that all of the team led by Shane is putting in to deliver this. So with all of that in mind, if I can move the recommendations in the report, if that's agreed, and I'm not seeing any dissent, so I shall take that as agreed. And if we can move on to the next item, which is item number 5, prioritising hydrogen buses in the Liverpool City region. And we've got Matt Goggins as our Assistant Director for Bus, who's presenting this for us. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So in the previous report, Shane gave you an update of the Transforming Cities Fund project, and this report provides a more in-depth briefing and background on two of those projects that the bus team are leading on. So that's the High Bus project, hydrogen bus project, as you might otherwise hear it, and the Green Bus Routes project too. So the reason why we're bringing them both together in the same report is to really demonstrate their close alignment and codependency. I guess in short, the best way to maximise the benefits of each project is through delivering both of the projects together in the way that Shane's previously described. There are a few things around the report that I particularly wanted to pick out. So firstly, we've declared a climate emergency in the city region, and many of the constituent authorities also have. We also have areas of both high deprivation and poor air quality, and those two things, as we know, so often overlap. And the impact of the health outcomes of poor air quality in particular are very significant. Where other sectors have taken action to reduce emissions, transport has stagnated at best. This is primarily driven by unsustainable increases in private car use, which leads to a negative spiral of more congestion, more pollution, and more modal shift away from the bus. And as we said before, this situation isn't a sustainable one. It's one of the reasons why we've set out our vision for bus and our ambition to build back better after COVID-19. So if we're going to get people to access new jobs and take advantage of leisure and hospitality opportunities in the future, we need a thriving bus network and an attractive bus network after COVID so that we don't sleepwalk into a car-driven recovery. Both these projects support that intention. So firstly, we want to place an order in the next few months for the North's first fleet of hydrogen-powered buses to operate on that St Helens to Liverpool corridor. And these buses will be state-of-the-art, high-quality vehicles, kind of proper best-in-class, which are powered by locally produced hydrogen and emit only water at the tailpipe. And secondly, it's no good if these hydrogen-powered buses are sitting in the same car-caused congestion as they always have done. On their own, they simply won't be enough. As good as they won't be enough to entice people out of their cars. And so we need to do even more to improve the attractiveness of the bus network relative to the private car. And our Green Bus Routes project is the way in which we intend to do this. So Green Bus Routes will focus significant investment on the St Helens to Liverpool corridor to speed up bus journeys through a range of interventions which could include, and our long list so far includes, signal upgrades, red routes, bus priority lanes, and improvements to parking along that route. The report gives more technical detail for each project, but it's important to say that these are the start and not the end of our ambition. We've set each project up to be scalable in line with the emerging national bus strategy, which we understand could make up to £3 billion available in England for exactly these types of projects. So what does that mean for us? Well, for hydrogen bus, this would mean increasing that initial order to 40 or more buses. For green bus routes, it would mean developing plans and delivering improvements to other routes as well, including routes to Crosby, Kirby, Widnes and Wirral, amongst others, as well as being able to raise the scale of our ambition further on the St Helens to Liverpool route. We believe the projects have the potential to be truly transformational in the real sense of the word for bus users in the region. I'm hopeful that members will not only support but become advocates for them in your local authority areas. That's whether you're one of the first up or whether it's about bringing hydrogen buses and green bus corridors to your areas in the future. Can't stress enough though, the ability to deliver these is absolutely critical to be able to attract additional funding to do more similar projects in the future. So as always, happy to take any questions on any aspects of the report, Chair.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Matt. I've certainly got Gordon indicating he wants to ask a question. Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. There's just 4 very quick questions, or you can say 1 question and 3 other supplementaries, whichever way I can get away with it. And Matt, you've convinced me. I'm going to be your top advocate. You've sold me on it. There wasn't much selling needed. Anyway, on the green route, it's just really in terms of the agenda, just some little pieces of information that I think, if they were there, would make it easier for members of the public seeing it, and also for when it goes to the combined authority, because we've had benefit of more information. So it's to see in the report there it's only the green route I've got to talk about, is really the number of minutes that you estimate is your target to be saved on, and would be nice to see something. I know I'd never hold you in the future to it exactly, but something rough would be nice. The delivery times for the likes of the 53 route, because I know you've got a common strategy to go out there, but anyone reading this would think, well, next week I'm going to see something getting done on the 53 route and I'll get it in the neck. So I'm protecting myself there. On the Transforming City funds where it's put in, it doesn't mention Sefton in it, but I assume where it says Liverpool, that feeds into Sefton as part of the route, but people might think, we've been missed out where we haven't. And just at a minor point on the equalities part of the report, is it simply says, like, there's not really any, but sometimes if on the equalities part, because I know you do the work in the background of it, if there was like a 1-liner sentence or 2-liner sentence to say what the key things you were seeing that would come from this would be helpful. Now, have I overburdened you with that, Matt, or are you okay with the 4 of them? And I bet you he's muted.
No, that's fine. I was waiting for my red box, and I was counting, and it was 4 things, Gordon. So, yeah, I'll work through each of those in turn then. So, I think in terms of the information we're providing here, we're trying to give you a good overview of the project rather than kind of on green routes first, rather than kind of specific detail. I can assure you and members, though, that as we get into that detail and we start to get into detailed design, which is the next stage of the project, there'll be significant amounts of local community engagement. We'll be looking for communities to kind of help shape our plans at the appropriate time, and all of those things will kind of happen before we get to the point where we're coming to the combined authority for approval. In terms of target minutes, I would say that very much depends on the interventions that we're able to bring forward. So we know, for example, that priority lanes will contribute to around half of the journey time savings, and that's very much something that we would like to do. The example that we often give on the 10A corridor is the fact that it takes 24 minutes longer now than it did 3 years ago to make that round trip, and I would be looking to at least claw that time back. But it does all depend on which of that long list of things that I talked about we're able to deliver and where. In terms of the 53 routes, so there's I think a map in the report which sets out the first 5 corridors. This is very much focused on work on the 10A. That's the first one that we're bringing forward. But we do want to do development work and progress to do similar on those other 4 corridors and elsewhere as well. We want this to be kind of the model for how we improve services in practical terms, kind of bringing that zero emission bus and bus punctuality and reliability improvements together. We've got to do that in as managed a way as possible. So we would like to do that same development work on other bus corridors, including the 53, and that will include Sefton as well. And I mentioned right at the very end the importance of getting this right and delivering proper improvements here. That'll give us the absolute best opportunity to be able to pull in additional funding from central government to do exactly that. And then in terms of kind of equality impact, I think it's right in terms of this report, which is just kind of updating where we are in the project and giving you an overview. There is no immediate impact, but we absolutely would expect the project to deliver significant equality improvements. We will be looking to include things like bus stop build-outs to ensure level boarding, the accessibility improvements that the new buses will bring as well, and we'll be looking to kind of co-design those interiors with lots of different bus users to make sure that we've got that right. So I guess be assured that when our plans are being developed, they will include that, and we'll report that at the appropriate time.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Matt. I've also got Steve indicating. Steve?
Yes, Chair, thanks very much. Actually, I can see the synergy between the previous report, the Transforming Cities Fund, of which two big schemes in the Wirral certainly could connect to this type of network, the Connecting Wirral Waterways, Wirral Waters, and the Central Station development. So I definitely see the synergies. I just pose the question because the public will look at this report and say, well, why wasn't there anything on the Wirral? Were there any particular barriers to Wirral, or was the professional judgment that these were the best place to start? I just want to say, I'm quite keen to be an advocate on behalf of Wirral for this technology, and if there was any particular barriers, we could work on removing them now in time for the next phase. But we're disappointed not to be in the first phase. So I'll pose that question to you. Any particular barriers, and can you definitely see synergies between the previous report?
Yeah, absolute synergies with the previous report. So, and that's, I guess, the purpose really for bringing together a number of projects in under the Transforming Cities banner is that we can kind of look at them and look at how they all kind of contribute to each other. So we're bringing two projects together here, hydrogen bus and green bus routes, but we're also in consideration of kind of digital infrastructure and active travel as well, and making sure that we're not kind of doing these things in isolation. In direct answer to your question about Wirral, absolutely no barriers to developing proposals for Wirral in future, other than kind of resource and our ability to kind of do that kind of detailed development work. We in the kind of prioritisation, if you like, of these 5 routes, and then within that, why we prioritised the St Helens to Liverpool corridor. It was really focused on a combination of how those routes are used, other availability of other modes of public transport, congestion and air quality, and also patronage on those routes. So we kind of looked at all of those things, and that resulted in those kind of first 5 routes, of which we're doing the development work on one of them. But as I mentioned earlier, I'd really like to see this being kind of the model for how we approach any high frequency bus routes, and you know the routes on the Wirral that could kind of very much fit into this type of model. Again, our ability to do that and our ability to make sure that we've got the funding to do that properly is very much tied to being able to do this first one properly and being able to kind of demonstrate that we can deliver and demonstrate that we can make a proper practical improvement to people's bus journeys, and I guess ultimately attract people out of their private cars and onto the bus network. I'd love to see a green bus route in Wirral and many more than the 5 that we've initially set out.
Okay, thanks very much for the answer, Matt. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I'm not seeing any further indications, so I'll just sort of wrap up, but I'll say that I'm really excited about this. I think this is really, really best practice stuff. One of the things I'm always very conscious of is lots of people across the region that might not live near to the Merseyrail network often sort of say, look, Merseyrail's fantastic, but what could we have? And genuinely, I see this as being a kind of Merseyrail of the road proposition, because what we're pulling together here is high quality infrastructure so people can have a really good, fast and efficient service with a really good quality head turning vehicle. It really is a kind of a full kind of line of route proposition. To be dead blunt about it, it's a trackless tram. That's what it is. And when kind of we see some of the kind of examples we've been shown, like the Belfast glider, for example, being a really good example, the Lee guided busway not that far away, how do we make sure that we're giving people that kind of very high quality sort of rail style service, but it just happens to be with rubber wheels? So I think what we're doing here is absolutely kind of phenomenal. And yes, you're absolutely right in project terms, Matt. Let's do it line by line. Let's make each line a success as we go to prove the concept. But in the fullness of time, this needs to be the standard we set for the whole of the bus network, and every part of the city region, including the Wirral, needs to have corridors that kind of do this. And certainly, you know, all the Steve's points with how the previous reports sort of fits in. I can see how on the Wirral, for example, this would be an excellent proposition for the Wirral Waters site as that develops, but also other parts of the Wirral, everywhere from Heswell to Liskeard, for example, that it would always be very, very difficult to put steel rail tracks down for, because they built up and all the kind of engineering challenges that gives. So I think what we're doing here is really, really exciting and something that we can look forward to start seeing take shape certainly within the next year, if we're going to be procuring that first fleet of hydrogen vehicles. And let's be honest, this is also about making good on not just our pledges, but our obligation to address the climate emergency. You know, one of the things we said under the terms of our vision for bus is that we want a zero emissions fleet by the middle of the 2030s. Well, guess what? This is the start of delivering that. So really well done to all of the team on pulling together this very exciting proposition that I look forward to see coming into fruition in the kind of months and years ahead. So if I can move the recommendations in the reports. Oh, yes, Francis, do you want
I've been trying to get through. I've had terrible trouble. I've had to have Knowsley Council on the phone to try and get me through. There's a few things I want to, sorry about that, say to Matthew. The number 10A bus, have you looked at the actual station where the buses park in St Helens when you bring these new hydro buses in? Because at the moment, the buses, the 10 and the 10A, are having to go around 3 times to get a standoff place for them to park. So that might need to be extended in some way. It's, you know, when you get these new hydro buses, I know you're saying they're going to be less buses, but don't forget in St Helens bus station there is also other buses which go to Wigan and outside the area and Rainford and everywhere. But the bus station, when the buses come in, they have to go around 3 times before they can park up anywhere. It's, you know, so I'm in favour of these hydro buses. Also, where is this? With the hydro buses, you know, the 89 bus that travels from St Helens and goes up to John Lennon Airport. Is there ever any chance that might be a hydro bus as well? Because it's a very, very long journey on that 89 bus. Heck of a journey. I don't know whether you've ever been on that route, but it's a really bad route, that route.
Matt, do you want to come back on those?
Is he unmuted?
You're on mute, Matt.
Just wait for him to come in. He might be having technological issues because his camera's off as well.
I've had trouble with this as well. I don't know what it is.
Is that okay? Can you hear
Are
me
you
now?
there, Matt? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. It was one of them when I was pressing the button and nothing was happening. So, I'm really glad you mentioned the issue of St Helens bus station. So we, I didn't go into this specifically in the presentation, but I did hint about the scalability of the project. So what we're doing here is a defined project within the budget that we've got potentially available in Transforming Cities and within the time scale. But I also mentioned that's the start, not the end of our ambition. So we've got another 3 phases beyond what we're talking about in this initial Transforming Cities fund of kind of what our ambition would be. And that would include new interchanges along the route and including St Helens. So St Helens bus station's a decent station, but it's not best in class, and that's something that we would want as a kind of a proper world-class bus interchange at St Helens, and we would like to see that in a future phase of this. And it goes back, and the same point applies to the what you said about the 89 and turning that into a hydrogen bus corridor. We're doing these projects within the resources and the timescales that we've got available, but if we're able to demonstrate delivery, that gives us a really good opportunity to go to government and say, look, you're setting out a national bus strategy, which is about improving journeys, about moving to zero emissions buses. Look at our track record of delivery, kind of back us to convert the 89 and convert other bus routes to hydrogen, and to kind of rebuild our interchanges where we need to do that. So I'm really glad you raised those questions, because they're absolutely in line with our ambition.
Well, the 89 bus goes up to John Lennon Airport anyway, but it's a heck of a route that poor 89. I feel sorry for the drivers, because every driver said, I wish it was on the 10 or the 10A, because it comes all through housing estates in St Helens. It goes through Gattaca, it goes through Walsall Village, it goes through a heck of a journey to get up to John Lennon Airport. It really is. If anybody's been on that route, they know what I'm talking about. It's really bad.
I used to drive that route.
Did you? It is bad, isn't it, Ken?
One of the best routes ever.
It is, actually.
Shall we do this through the chair, everyone? I think we'll all look forward to travelling on the 89 route when the sort of restrictions are at ease to a level. But Matt, do you want to come back, and then we can move on accordingly?
Okay, sorry. Thanks, Matt.
Yes, sorry. I think I've covered the answers. If you managed to hear me around kind of both the 89 and the St Helens interchange.
Well, can I just ask one more question?
Of course you can, Francis.
Where's this Linden depot? Whereabouts in St Helens is it? Where you're doing the hydro?
Yeah. I'll just wait for my box to come back on. Yeah. It's really close to the St Helens Arriva bus depot. It's the BOC site, BOC production facility in St Helens. So we'll be looking to through BOC to have the region's first hydrogen refueling station on that site.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Thank you for your time. Sorry to trouble you.
Not a problem at all, Francis. That's what we're here to do, ask questions and amongst other things hold officers to account. But some really excellent work that Matt and the team are doing there. So if I can move the recommendations, that we know the contents of the report, but more importantly, as part of this, that we actually strongly support the project and get behind them to see them come to fruition, because we look forward to be able to kind of riding on those services and kind of visiting BOC, and hopefully in the fullness of time seeing it extend right across the network. So if that's agreed, and I'm not seeing any kind of dissent, we can move on accordingly. If we can move on then to item number 6, which is the Mersey Ferries update, and Gary Evans, I think, is going to be taking us through this. Gary?
I am. Thanks, Liam. Good afternoon, everybody. So the purpose of this report is just to give you an operational update on the Mersey Ferries operations over the past 6 months. Just to summarise the report rather than repeat it, sections 3.2 to 3.8 of the report, they provide an operational update in respect of our service, and places particular emphasis on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the Mersey Ferries service. To summarise, really, it's been a challenging time for Mersey Ferries over the summer, as it has been for many businesses. And traditionally, the Ferries provides a cross-river transport network, but supplements its income through a range of leisure activities. And since at the outbreak of COVID in March earlier this year, the service has seen a significant decline in usage, particularly from the leisure side. And actually, at one point, we actually suspended service between the periods end of March into middle of May. And since the recommence of that service in May, we've seen a focus be very much on our commuter, our cross-river transport service, offering the resilience in terms of the transport network to the cross-river and cross-rail bus and rail services. And in particular, all of our leisure cruises at Mersey Ferries, our Manchester ship canals, which we're quite famous for, our evening cruises, which we've built up really well, all of which have had to be cancelled during that summer period, which has led to a range of challenges for the Mersey Ferries operations. And the report in those sections looks to provide some detail for members around what that's meant in terms of numbers. Section 3.9 to 3.15 of the report provides members with further summary around our current position on progress relating to the Mersey Ferries long-term strategy, which looks at how we deal with our assets, specifically the vessels and our terminal locations, in a bit more detail. And there's a summary paragraph on each of those for members to refer to. I suppose the key points to note in that report are we are very near to a major refurbishment works on site at our Seacombe terminal, and they are due to commence in January, very early in January 2021. And that will see the two link span bridges, which are nearly 140 years old, actually be replaced now. They're no longer fit for purpose at that terminal. And we'll use the opportunity to get our landing stage refurbished out of water to make sure that it is in a strong and maintenance-free position for the next 25 years. I think and that work will actually mean we'll see Seacombe Terminal closed for a period of time, and actually means we'll operate a cross-river commuter service from Woodside, utilising our second terminal on the Wirral, just to ensure we're able to maintain that cross-river service. I suppose the second element and key to note before I open it up for questions is around our work with Eureka and the Eureka Mersey project. That has been delayed, unfortunately, due to COVID, but is now back on track, and legal agreements are in place with our partners in Eureka. And while it will see a slight delay, we are looking forward to the attraction opening in summer of 2022. So the majority of that detail is now back on track, and we're able to look forward to works commencing on site again around the spaceport building in early 2021. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair, that members may have.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Gary. I've got Gordon indicating first. Gordon?
Thank you, Chair. Gary, thank you for that report as well. It's just that I noticed on the equalities impact stuff, very good line there, because I think it's this report's for noting, so we obviously know in the background there's lots of equality impact assessments going on. But I think that's great to highlight what you consider to be a matter of good interest for the public, because seeing that accessibility for the ferries is put in there is going to be really enlightening for a lot of people that need to access the ferries, and they'll be able to go on trains that have got really good accessibility for them, and stations that will access. So I imagine you're very proud of in doing customer delivery that sees a group of people really being looked after by our organisation, and I thank you for putting that part in your report.
Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. Are there any other indications if anyone wants to ask a question or speak? I'm not seeing anything.
No one has indicated they wish to speak, Chair.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Trudy. Well, I'll just sort of echo sort of Gordon's thanks, and particularly sort of say, Gary, as well, that kind of obviously the pandemic has been really challenging for the ferry service, just as it has for every other part of the public transport network, but it has continued to play a very vital and sort of socially distanced, because of its large capacity, link across the river. So if you could certainly pass on all of our thanks to all of the ferries team for all the very sort of significant and hard work in very challenging circumstances that they're doing at this moment in time through the pandemic, that would be really appreciated from us if you can pass that on. Otherwise, if there's no further contributions, if I can move the recommendations in the report, if that's agreed, and again, not seeing any kind of dissent, so I shall take that as agreement. And that allows us to move on to item number 7, which is the multi-operator ticketing scheme and the product and pricing proposals for the years ahead. And again, I think, Gary, you're going to take us through this one as well. So.
I am indeed, Chair. Thank you very much. Okay, this report a little bit more detailed and not for noting, obviously. The ticket price setting process is something that this committee have historically held and continue to do. So the report covers the price setting arrangements for our multimodal, multi-operator ticketing suite for 2021. So for the avoidance of doubt, that is the Trio, the Solo, the Rail Pass, Save Away and My Ticket. The prices are set annually, and in considering any relevant price increases, we take the RPI rate in July each year as a starting point for any price increases. So the report details in this year, in July 2020, that the figure was 1.6%. And then from that, prices are rounded downwards. The process also allows for any significant economic or social issues to be taken into account, including any matters that may be of significant increase for operator costs, for example. This year, COVID has had a significant impact on this process and on public transport as a whole, and the report looks to set that out in some detail, particularly between sections 3.4 to 3.6 of the report for members as background. Approval is therefore set to increase the prices while Rail Pass, Trio and Save Away, but I would stress at this stage it's for approval only. It is unlikely that our Trio and Save Away products would be increased. So within the report, Chair and members, I actually detail that the CBSSG terms and conditions mean that you are not able to increase or amend ticket prices on bus services. And our Save Away and our Trio products are multimodal, and therefore the DFT's position is their terms are governed by the CBSSG grant. So for the avoidance of doubt, while the report seeks approval of that, the Trio and Save Away products will not actually increase until the CBSSG comes to an end. So at this stage, the only proposed increase that will be implemented is the Rail Pass products. Again, for the avoidance of doubt, the date of increase is usually the 2nd of January each year, in line with the national rail industry price increases. But again, that date is not confirmed this year. The date is likely to be at some point in Q1, and the benefit of that is, even if we do approve the increase today, the customer will benefit from the 2020 price rates for a longer period of time. So it is a benefit for the customer if it is implemented later, which is pleasing to see. So quite a complex report for this year, and one I expect probably a number of questions on. But from our side, we have done what we believe to be the right position, and discussions with bus operators will only take place once the CBSSG comes to an end, because as any of us face at the moment, the end of COVID is, and when that's likely to be, is probably anybody's guess at this stage, and we hope it's sooner rather than later, but it would be prudent to have those discussions then rather than in advance. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, that's great, Gary. Are there any questions or comments that anyone wants to bring forward? I'm not seeing any indications, so I'll just sort of say, I think, you know, kind of what you're bringing forward here is sort of eminently sensible. You know, price rises are never popular, but we always know that kind of they have to sort of keep pace with sort of how costs increase. But obviously, in the current environment, many people out there are really struggling. So, you know, being able to kind of freeze prices is the right thing to do. It would have been great if we could have done that on on the rail side of things as well, but obviously that's not in our gift because the government sets the national fares policy, and in my view, foolishly, I kind of the view that they want to see rail prices go up again next year. But certainly on the bus side of things, it's very clear the terms of, I know we've used the acronym CBSSG, I prefer to call it the National Industry Bailout because that's what it is, but actually under the terms of that, bus operators shouldn't be making a profit. It should be done on break-even economics, because if they did make a profit, that needs to be returned back to the taxpayer under the current environment. But it's very clear that the terms of that deal are that, as you rightfully say, Gary, that bus ticket prices should not change. They shouldn't go up or they shouldn't go down. So being in a position that we can freeze those at this stage is exactly the right thing to do. So I think a lot of hard work's gone in there, but exactly the right thing to do in a very difficult time for all of our travelling public, not just now, but potentially into the future as well. So if there's no further contributions, if I can move the recommendations that are in paragraph 2 of the report, if that's agreed. And again, not getting any dissent, so I shall take that as agreement. Thank you. Okay, if we then move on to item number 8, which is the quarterly financial report for quarter 2, and we've got Sarah who's going to take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides members of the committee with details on the revenue and capital performance for Merseytravel through to the period 30th of September this year. Members will also note that the report includes a revised budget for the current financial year. Now, this was flagged as part of the quarter 1 report as being something that we needed to do to take effect and to take account of some of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll caveat at this point that clearly the budget has been revised based on the position we knew at the time. To the extent that things continue to move on and we continue to be affected, there may be a need to revisit this further. However, notwithstanding that, I'm going to take the report as read and I'll just really bring to members' attention some of the key points. So at 3.3, what we've detailed is the revised budget against the original budget as was approved by members in January last year. Now, there's been a huge amount of work undertaken by my staff and heads of service to look at the budgets and to undertake quite a significant piece of work looking at what the spend patterns to date are and where budgets and spend were likely to be at the end of the year. And what we've done is to look to align budgets accordingly. Now, to balance the overall position with as little impact as possible on the bottom line, what we've looked to do is where we can take savings, we have taken them. And this has helped us to realign the budgets where there have been pressures in areas like ferries, for example, so that we can increase the budgets accordingly. Now, members will note that in balancing the budget for this year, we've had to increase the use of reserves in the first instance by 1.37. However, we do have access to reimbursement via the combined authority for something called the sales fees and charges. Members may be aware of this from their own districts, but the MHCLG, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, has opened up to allow organisations to seek to recover certain income that has been lost as a result of COVID, where the sales fees and charges. Now, it's fairly constrained as to what this can be used for, and it is quite prescriptive. However, we have made an application to this. At this juncture, we've had no confirmation from government that this has been accepted, and on that basis, we haven't factored the income in at this juncture. That said, if we were to be successful in that claim, we estimate the claim that's been put up into the end of July would give us an additional 1 million. And to the extent that we are able to generate income through this, we would reduce the use of reserves accordingly. The next part of the report details the capital spend. Members will note that, sorry, not capital spend, sorry, it's the revenue budget. That's detailing the revenue spend against the revised budgets. There is an element of underspend that's being shown. However, this is the reason for this are detailed at 3.8, and it's likely that a number of these areas will see the variances decrease over the year as activity that was delayed in the first part of the year is undertaken in the second part. Notwithstanding that, there are a number of areas where there are some timing differences, which again will see the budget reduce over the remaining year. The next section of the report is actually the capital spend, and as at the end of September, we've spent 26% of the capital budget that's been approved. Now, spend is lower than we would have expected at this point, and there's clearly an impact of COVID that will continue. However, there are a number of large schemes, as detailed in the report, that we'll be getting on site shortly and will see spend levels increase. The final part of the report details projected reserves and risks, which still have the impact to the potential to impact on the current and future year's budgets. Members will recall in the Q1 report there was quite a significant amount of detail. I don't intend to go through that in any more detail. However, it's suffice to say that they still exist and they still are risks which we will look to manage and monitor throughout the year. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thanks ever so much for that, Sarah. Any questions or comments that anybody has?
No one's indicated they wish to speak, Councillor Robinson.
Okay, no, that's
sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I was just sorry.
Yeah, of course, Steve. If you want to come in, yeah.
Just to comment. Obviously, Sarah's given a very full account of where we are, and whilst this report was being written, we went into Tier 3 lockdown, and now we're into a national lockdown. So quite clearly, it is a moving feast. And there are some things we simply cannot control. I think to use a phrase you've used, Liam, it's a perfect storm, COVID, in terms of the organisation we run, from people not travelling, to even the Beatles story which has been closed. So we are in a position where we can predict a balanced budget, and I think many organisations won't be in that position. But really, the challenge will come setting next year's budget with all we know now and what's to come. So I'd just like to thank Sarah and the team for a lot of hard work that they've done, putting this together in a readable form. I think most members now understand the position the organisation's in as it is now, but we will watch with interest as COVID progresses. But I'd just like to thank the team and recommend that the report be noted and continue to monitor the situation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve, and echo everything you say. I think kind of to use that weather analogy of a perfect storm, I think quite often it's a bit like trying to make a journey in thick fog. You're pretty sure you know where we might be headed, but you've got to sort of step slowly and cautiously to make sure that we don't end up having an accident or anything like that. So I know how hard the team are working to make sure that we end up in the best position in extremely difficult circumstances, and obviously in the short term that means getting through the months of this financial year, but obviously with one very, very keen eye on the years ahead and the challenges that could mean. Obviously we will keep on banging on the door of government. At the start of this pandemic, they were very clear about saying spend whatever it takes. We have done that in the right way to support our residents and support our local economy, but we do expect government for the long term to make good on that kind of offer, not just to kind of cover some of our additional costs, but help us build back better, because the transport network is going to be an absolutely vital part of that, both in recovering from the pandemic, but also making sure that our economy and our environment come out of this in a better place. I think one other point I would just sort of make the point of, because the report does reference it, is the government is obliging us at this moment in time, as part of that buses bailout they've done with the bus industry, to maintain all of our payments to bus companies at pre-pandemic levels, both supported payments for subsidised routes, but also as well concessionary payments for older people, many of which for understandable shielding reasons aren't travelling at this moment in time. Now, whilst we fully accept that the bus industry does need significant financial support to make sure that the network is maintained, to allow residents to make all of those essential journeys they need to make, our strong view always has been that those additional funds that the government is making available to bus companies should be devolved to the city region. So added with the payments that we would normally make, we could take devolved decisions that would be of much better value for the taxpayer, but would allow us to specify the bus network as a means of actually delivering a better transport network throughout the rest of the pandemic as a precursor to reform in the future. We will continue to bang on the government's door. We've given them a proposition as to how we think that could be done and devolved to us so we could deliver it in a way that kind of would suit the needs of our local people better than is currently the case, but we will continue to plug away at that. There's lots of elements within the report that genuinely kind of go through in lots of detail where we're up to, but I would finally kind of close on Steve's point that I would sort of fully recommend this for acceptance if I can move the recommendations within the report, if that's agreed. And again, not seeing any kind of opposition to that, so I will take that as unanimity. If we move on to our next item, which is item number 9, and that's responding to the Department for Transport's consultation on pavement parking. And I believe we've got Hugh, who's going to take us through the draft response. Hugh?
Thanks very much, Chair. Hope you can hear me okay. My colleague Andy Sawyer, who co-authored the report, is also available, who's a technical expert on the issues at stake should members have further questions or queries at the end, Chair. But I'll just very quickly go through the gist of the report, if that's okay. So what we're setting out in the report for members' consideration is a draft response to a consultation that the Department for Transport launched at the end of August on the issue of inconsiderate pavement parking. And really this forms part of a suite of measures that members considered, certainly in the previous meeting, around how we can support a green post-COVID recovery, particularly by encouraging more people to choose walking and cycling for how they travel. The consultation that we're looking at here stems from a very alarming review whereby a third of people with visual impairments and almost half of wheelchair users were not willing to go out because of antisocial pavement parking. So I think this highlights the urgency of this problem, or of tackling this problem, and is why this consultation has now come to the fore, both to ensure that we've got accessible streets, but we're also supporting walking and cycling in particular as well. The consultation is looking at 3 broad aims and 3 broad powers that might be available for local authorities to deal with inconsiderate pavement parking. They're set out in section 3.5 of the report. Very, very quickly, there are 3 main options. One is improving an established process called the traffic regulation order process. These are processes that cover anything from speed limits to restricted parking, waiting restrictions, and so forth that members will be very, very familiar with. The second is a legislative change to allow local authorities with civil parking powers to enforce against the unnecessary obstruction of a pavement. And the third is a London-style blanket ban, in effect, on pavement parking. Now, in responding to the consultation in section 4 and the draft that's set out in the appendix to this report for members' consideration, we've obviously worked closely with our constituent local authorities, who are the highway authorities, and in most cases are the authority for enforcing against parking and decriminalised parking. In summary, the consensus of officers of the combined authority and our colleagues across the local authorities is option 2. This is the legislative change that would give local authorities additional powers. We consider that this is full square with the principles of devolution. It's pragmatic and workable, and it does reflect that whilst the blanket ban might sound attractive, actually the workload associated with it, the resource implications, virtually make it unworkable in our view. And equally, this can allow local areas to tailor the powers and tailor how this is dealt with according to their circumstances. So, for example, pavement parking might be acceptable in some situations where that is allowing the passage of buses, for example, or the safe passage of emergency service vehicles. So it's that very practical option. And as we set out in the report, we consider that both option 1, the traffic regulation order process, and 3, which are about the blanket ban, are very, very complex, very bureaucratic, very, very costly, and there will be no additional funding to support this directly. That's the broad shape of our response. The response is 80-90% there. Given the timing, the consultation does close in another 2 weeks. So we are still hoping to finalise this response and to refine it, particularly with further examples from our local authority colleagues to strengthen the points we're making. So what we'd like to do here is to commend the broad thrust of the response to members, but to seek delegated authority to allow us, in conjunction with the chair, with you, Chair, to make any final working amendments to that submission, which is due in to the Department for Transport on the 22nd of November. So hope that sets the scene, and I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. No, thanks very much, Hugh. And before I bring Gordon in as the first indicated question, personally, I think we're absolutely right to support option 2, because one of the things I'm very conscious of is that a London-style ban sounds attractive, but large parts of Liverpool, Bootle, Birkenhead and other parts of the region are pre-war terrace streets, where practically if you banned pavement parking, it just would not work because all the cars would end up blocking the road, simple as that. So there has to be that kind of pragmatism and practicality about it. If I can move on to Gordon then to ask his question. As it clicks on accordingly. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little bit delay in my pressing the mouse button and it actually working again. Sometimes you get that little glitch. Yeah, no, I think you just covered the point I was going to bring up, Chair. And thank you for that summary that you gave verbally to say that that's quite precise in what we're doing. And the question really to you is just to ask that within the agenda where we got the recommendations, do you think we should actually say in 2.1 agrees the direction, and we got B, agrees the direction of the consultation response as set out on the appendix of this report, somewhere in there to say that it's option 2, just so it's highlighted at the very beginning? I think that's where we're aimed at, isn't it? So if we've got the recommendations and we just put the words option 2 in as being what we put into our submission, that might be easier, an easier read. I'll leave it to the great and the good officers to come to an answer on that one. Thank you.
Brilliant. Hugh, do you want to come back on that at all? Or?
No, thanks, Chair. Absolutely, yes. For absolute clarity, option 2 is what we're recommending to members, and that's the shape of the response that's set out in the appendix. And I'm sure colleagues will be able to make that clear in the minutes if that's members' agreement, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. I've got Patrick next. Patrick, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the option 2 proposal because I think we do need flexibility. However, one observation I would make is about the new planning system. Well, it's not that new now, the National Policy Planning Framework, and the density of developments on some sites. I think what needs to happen is the government or whoever needs to beef up the robustness of the assessment around density when they consider building houses without a due consideration of the potential for people to own more than one car. I could name several estates around where I represent where they've actually built houses where the density is quite high and the number of cars, it looks awful. They're parking all over the pavements. It's just actually dreadful. So I think the headlong rush to kind of simplify the planning system may have a byproduct where they make issues about residents parking much worse unless something's done about the criteria within the National Policy Planning Framework. Thank you.
Hugh, do you want to come back on any of those points, particularly as a town planner by trade? Sort of, yeah.
I'm straying across briefs here, Chair, but no, Councillor McKinley's points are well made that the design of new development is absolutely fundamental to both accommodating vehicles and managing demand for vehicles. And as you were saying, Chair, one of the challenges we have in our city region is that pavement parking is almost an inevitability in some places because of the design of the housing, because it wasn't designed around the need for the needs of the motor car. Moving forward, we need to be reducing reliance on the car for all the reasons that colleagues have discussed throughout the agenda items on green buses, on climate emergency, on a shift to clean fuels. So we need to be absolutely designing streets and places that are fundamentally for people, that are there for people, not just the movement of vehicles. And again, that's where this consultation fits in quite nicely in recognising that inconsiderate parking is a factor that deters people from walking and cycling, as we've seen. But also, yeah, absolutely, there's a wider range of mixes, or a wider mix of measures that we need to take forward to encourage people to live differently, to travel differently. And I think this is where schemes like car clubs come in, whereby it's not essential that people own their own vehicle, but they can hire a vehicle at short notice. And equally, the trial now in the city around e-scooters, for example, and indeed e-bikes. All of these are emerging as potential alternatives to actually owning a car or having to use a car for every single trip, as well as, of course, the core public transport network. All of our policies are around reducing reliance on the car, and planning policies are absolutely fundamental to that, Chair. That's what I'd add as an addition, but completely agree with the principle of the point made.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Hugh, and I think you might need to answer the phone now. I'm joking, of course. No, thanks ever so much for that. I think sort of if I can move the recommendations, I think one of the things I was going to say, I'm keen to make sure that it's a draft here, so all the committee members get the opportunity to have a look at the final response. So if we can work on that, and then a few days prior to submission, I can then email that round just for any final kind of comments, but fully acknowledge that we've got the draft 90% there, and it's a very, very good, strong alloy of all the kind of all the responses we've had from all of our colleagues across all 6 districts. So really good sort of bit of work there. So if I can remove those recommendations, if that's agreed, and again, I'm not sort of hearing anything otherwise, then we can accept that. Can I just ask everyone puts themselves onto mute, because we can hear a phone conversation in the background. So if you can make sure you're on mute, that would be absolutely great. Okay, if we're agreed on that, I'll move on to the final substantive item, which is item number 10, which is responding to Greater Manchester's Clean Air Plan. And I think this is you again, Hugh, taking us through this. So.
Thanks, Chair, and I will be brief again. It's another consultation response, Chair, this time from just over the border from our colleagues at Greater Manchester. As it sets out in the report, as I'm sure members will be aware, from quite a bit of interest in the press for obvious reasons, there is now a live consultation underway by the Greater Manchester local authorities, the 10 local authorities through the combined authority, to take forward a clean air zone for the Greater Manchester conurbation. And this follows a mandate by central government to do that because of long-standing air quality problems across Greater Manchester. The requirement is to deal with the problem in the shortest possible time, and the government has mandated what's known as a Band C clean air zone, effectively a zone whereby commercial vehicles would need to pay to access the area. So vans, buses, heavy goods vehicles, taxis, but not private vehicles. Those vehicles that are listed would need to pay a suitable fee. And the appendix to this report, which has been produced by colleagues at Greater Manchester, sets out how those charging regimes would work and how the proposals would work. So we recognise we've been consulted as an adjoining local authority. St Helens, of course, has a border with Greater Manchester, and we recognise that the two city regions work very closely together. The travel to work flows are there on both sides. So we've always reflected and accepted that plans, policies, funding regimes, charging regimes in Greater Manchester have an impact on us and vice versa. So we considered it important to set out our response to this consultation. Because the timing of the consultation, Chair, which only came out very, very recently and closes fairly quickly as well on the 3rd of December, we're asking for delegated authority to develop a response. It will be a high level response. And as we've set out in section 4 of the report. We're suggesting that we, at one level, support what colleagues at Greater Manchester are trying to do, of course, in dealing with the grave problems of poor air quality, and to welcome the approach they're making to tackle the problem. But equally, we want to make the point, we're recommending that we make the point, that we need to consider the cross-boundary implications very clearly in terms of vehicles perhaps changing route, changing their flows to avoid the charging area, which is always a risk, of course, the risk of moving a problem, or equally that clean fleets, particularly buses, white vans, for example, freight vehicles are moved clean vehicles are moved into Greater Manchester, and dirtier older vehicles cascaded out, which would clearly not be in our interests or in adjoining local authorities' interests either. So consider it important to make those points and to continue to work with our colleagues at Greater Manchester to avoid unintended consequences in effect, and to make sure that the proposals that are developed by Greater Manchester do give consideration and recognise the impact that the scheme in GM could have just to the west here in the Liverpool City region. So that delegated authority is proposed for those reasons, Chair, and the consultation document is there for colleagues and members to read, and I'm happy to deal with any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Hugh. And I think, again, like the previous item, obviously time has been as such with deadlines that kind of we've not been able to kind of draft a response yet, but obviously in advance of us submitting something, I'll be very keen for us to circulate that around all committee members so they could have the kind of the look at it and kind of suggest any further alterations that they might kind of feel are suitable. I've got a couple of indications to speak, so John, I'll ask you to come in first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks very much, Hugh, for that report. Just very briefly for me, I'm just thinking on a macro level, really, given the fact that air does not have any geographical boundaries, how closely are we working with the likes not only of just Manchester, but the rest of Cheshire and North Wales, but even at a greater level than that, across the country indeed, because clearly, as I said before, air knows no boundaries. So how closely in conjunction are we working with these other authorities to be able to coordinate a response to our own clean air priorities? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Very good question. The simple answer is that we are working with a range of local authorities for exactly those reasons, Councillor Stockton, that you're absolutely right. You can't look at this in isolation. So through established networks, thinking of the Mersey Alliance, thinking of the Urban Transport Group, we are working with adjoining local authorities and similar conurbations that are looking at clean air zone proposals. You'll be aware that most of the major cities are looking at these sorts of solutions. I think in many ways there are elements of clean air zones that would be much better operated centrally and coordinated centrally, because I think we all recognise there is a risk of displacement. There is a risk of problems being moved between conurbations rather than tackled at source. So that's been a long-standing concern of me and a number of colleagues that have been working on this, working in this field for a number of years, that we do call on governments to help address some of the causes of the problems. When it comes to issues like vehicle retrofits, these are issues that probably rest at a national level as opposed to at a local or city regional level. But to answer your question, Chair, we are working closely, and with credit to colleagues at Greater Manchester, they have been very proactive in engaging us on these proposals over the last 18 months as our neighbours.
Thanks, Hugh. I will be making a contribution to the consultation, so thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Gordon?
Thank you, Chair. It's excuse my naivety on this one, Hugh, because I've been concentrating so much on electric vehicles that I went through what had been done as the consultation, and then it suddenly struck me just before about LPG retrofitting and a £5,000 grant for that. I don't know why that's a consideration. All I can remember about the LPG was, didn't we have a big car park in Liverpool go up with a massive number of motor vehicles catching fire as well? So I'm not quite sure about what why that's in as a consideration. That might not be something you know the answer to specifically, but it just surprised me that that was one of the ones that would be looked at. And another part of the question is that they're going to charge taxis. How is that hackneys? Because I only know when a private hire vehicle is operating as a taxi and not a private one. Your questions, my questions, your answers. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I don't pretend to be an expert on different types of fuels, I'm afraid, but as colleagues will have picked up from the consultation, it's certain types of engine that fall foul of the standard, if you like. So if you have, for example, a bus or a diesel vehicle, to be accurate, that's not at Euro 6 standard, if it's below that standard, you will pay to go into the clean air zone. But if a vehicle is of the required standard, you don't. So I'm assuming, and this is all I am doing, I'm afraid, Councillor Friel, is assuming that certain types of LPG vehicles fall within that required standard, so are therefore incentivised. The other part of the question was, you'll just need to remind me, please.
It was really just when if they're charging taxis, right? If you've got a private hire vehicle, how do you know when it's operating as a taxi and not as a personal vehicle?
Apologies, yes. I think it's all linked to automatic number plate recognition. Quite how or if Greater Manchester or any other authority would be able to differentiate between a vehicle being used privately and for trade, I honestly don't know. But the enforcement, if you like, and the charging would be done through automatic number plate recognition.
That wouldn't show you, sorry, Chair, is that wouldn't show you what's being operated for the purpose. So maybe that's something you can consider if you think valid to put under consultation. I don't know, I'm perfectly fine at your discretion, those are just 2 points I didn't understand, to be honest, as I've seen it. Well, thank you very much for the report, you.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Gordon. I don't see anyone else indicating, so again, I'll just wrap up by saying that first and foremost, personally, I sort of strongly support the principle of what they're doing in Greater Manchester, and we should bear in mind that sort of Liverpool City Council has been mandated in the second wave to looking at a clean air zone, so obviously we work very closely with the City Council on that, but also Sefton is looking at what the potential for a clean air zone could mean in parts of the borough of Sefton as well. So it makes eminent sense that in responding to this consultation, that obviously we support the principle, but we do sort of point out the need to make sure there aren't any negative sort of unintended consequences. Everything, like Hugh suggested, of dirtier fleets being cascaded elsewhere, including to our own city region, but also as well having the potential for a number of different charging regimes across the country that don't dovetail. It has to be something that properly integrates. So if I can move the recommendations on the report as shown on the screen now, if that's agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent, thanks for that. Moving on then, we've got the final few items. Public question time. We haven't had any public questions submitted this time. Item 12 is petitions and statements, and we've had no petitions and statements submitted this time. And item 13 is any other urgent business approved by the chair, other than me really just to sort of say, look, as we've entered the second national lockdown, the next month and potentially longer is going to be really, really difficult for our city region, all of our communities. I genuinely want to pay tribute to all of our staff and all of the frontline transport workers who will be out there providing that essential network that will be needed for people to make essential journeys. And then just finally say to all members, all officers here in the meeting today and beyond, and anyone that's watching at home, please stay safe and well over the weeks and months ahead, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting in early December. And I'll close the meeting and thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.